What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be giving you my Big Ten power rankings after week 3. It was another pretty insane week power rankings-wise in the Big Ten. It was absolutely an insane week. A lot of teams at the top ended up losing, and a lot of teams at the bottom ended up winning. So again, there was a lot of shuffling around in this power rankings. If it's one thing we can all agree on, it's power rankings, right? No, obviously not. You guys can feel free to give me your power rankings in the comment section down below if you would like. But for right now, let's get into my power rankings. And the team that did not move from where they were last week is the Illinois Fighting Illini after losing by 27 points to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Illinois is just on the struggle bus this year, and I know they're dealing with COVID stuff, like Brandon Peters is still out, and I believe he's still going to be out for this game against Rutgers, and that's going to be the last game he'll have to sit out. Rutgers is not an easy opponent, but when you look, I've done something new this power rankings. I have put the team's respective rank in the Big Ten, so every team has played at max 3 games now, and I think it's starting to fare right now to compare where they are among all of the Big Ten teams. And Illinois just looks to be dead last in almost every single category. Now, they've played some pretty decent teams like Purdue and Wisconsin. And then they face Minnesota, who is a pretty okay team, but Illinois just has not performed at all. You see, again, they're almost dead last in every major Big Ten category that I have, or statistical category in the Big Ten that I have included here. Just all around, not a good showing from Illinois this season at all. Maybe when Brandon Peters gets back, they can get in the win column, but the way that they are playing, I do not see them getting in the win column anytime soon. That's why Illinois is at number 14. Michigan State find themselves back at number 13 after an abysmal performance against the Iowa Hawkeyes. They lost 7-49 and dropped 5 spots from last week. Now, that one win against Michigan State is keeping them at a last place. But, again, we saw the Michigan State that just cannot hang on to the football. And you look, they're pretty much at the bottom of every major category except opponent yards per game. But the reason why the opponent is scoring so many points is that it's capitalizing off of the turnovers, and Michigan State is giving them a lot of short fields. So the number for opponent yards per game can be pretty deceptive, but when you look at the points per game and the amount of turnovers that this Michigan State team has, I think it's like 10 in 3 games, like 10 or 11 in 3 games, which is absolutely insane and ridiculous. No team should ever have a stat like that, but that's the situation Michigan State find themselves in. I do think Mel Tucker can get this program to be back where Mark D'Antonio had them. If not, they're maybe close. But they have a tough one next week up against Indiana. It'll be interesting to see if Michigan State again can turn it around against what is assumed to be another tougher opponent like the game against Michigan was when they first played. But Michigan State has to fall back to number 13 because I don't know which Michigan State is the real Michigan State. All right, so number 12 is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. You don't fault them for losing to Ohio State, especially with the battle that they did end up giving Ohio State towards the end of that game. They get a pretty easy one next week against Illinois, but the reason that they did not move down is, again, just the 2 teams below them are not that great. I think Rutgers could have some potential, and against Illinois, they could improve to 500, but their stats are all over the place, pretty much in the bottom half of the Big Ten, which is where Rutgers usually is, but overall an improvement from previous years under Greg Schiano. He can get this program up. The one win was against Michigan State, but again, that's not looking all that great right now, especially since Michigan State doesn't look all that great. I know they have the win against Michigan, but now even Michigan isn't looking so great. And the 2 losses Rutgers has are to Ohio State and Indiana, 2 of the better teams in the Big Ten. So you don't fault Rutgers a whole lot for that, but overall a pretty solid offensive team. Yards per game definitely could improve. They're not even at the 300 mark yet, but defensively they've got to improve. Rutgers, I think, is heading in the right direction, but on this week's list, they come in at number 12. What has happened to the Penn State Nittany Lions? They find themselves 11th in the poll, in the power rankings right now. They're unranked for the first time since 2016, 0-3 for the first time, I think, since 2001, losing to Maryland. Now, Maryland was a team no one expected much of, and they could be pretty decent this year. You look at the stats, and it's just not Penn State's statistics. I know they're without their top two running backs and their top defensive player, Micah Parsons, but they still have some great defensive players. And again, a team that can recruit as good as Penn State should be pretty deep. But again, there's just a lot going on with this Penn State team. They dropped 5 spots from where they were last week, and overall they have dropped 9 spots from where I had them in the preseason all the way up at number 2, and it does not look like Penn State is going to end up getting that high. It's already a disappointing year for Penn State. You think maybe they can get in the win column against Nebraska, but to be honest, I don't really know. That game against Nebraska is going to be really interesting to watch. Man, Penn State has got to figure it out quick, because I think this team still is really good, but they've had some disappointing losses. Now, Indiana and Ohio State, of course, look really well. It's the same situation as Rutgers, but Penn State doesn't have a win like Rutgers, which you could argue is why you put them below Rutgers. This is why power rankings are a lot of fun. People disagree. However, I still think Penn State is a pretty solid football team. Again, this game against Nebraska is going to be really, really interesting to watch, but Penn State has got to turn it around fast, but for right now, they're going to be at number 11. Speaking of Nebraska, they are at number 10 after playing their first game in 2 weeks. They only drop 1 spot after losing to Northwestern, who still looks pretty good. They find themselves 0-2, but could get a win against this Penn State team. Now, the numbers here, again, are pretty misleading, as they have only played 2 games against 2 pretty good teams in Northwestern and Ohio State. But this Nebraska team, you take nothing away from them. I think they're talented offensively. I think defensively they have a little bit to work on, and I think that might be the challenge here against Penn State. What helps is they get Penn State at home, which, again, you might feel more comfortable at home, but home field advantage really necessarily isn't a thing this year. It's really, really interesting going to be to watch that game, as I just talked about with Penn State. But losing to Northwestern, not that big of a deal. It was a game that Nebraska controlled for the first half, but Northwestern really did control for the second half. So it was a tale of 2 halves. I think Nebraska can pull off what I think a lot of people would be considered an upset, although I'm not really sure at this point against Penn State. We'll have to see how that game goes, but Nebraska finds themselves at number 10. The first team in the single digits is going to be the Minnesota Golden Gophers, up 2 spots after that win against Illinois. They don't jump that high, but they do jump because teams that were ahead of them last week did lose and ended up falling behind them. Minnesota is another interesting team because this is a really talented team offensively with Tanner Morgan, Mohammed Ibrahim, Rashad Bateman, Ottman Bell. There are a lot of great offensive players on this team, but it's the defense you look on, given up 36 points per game and 481 yards per game. That yardage rank is dead last in the Big Ten, and they have to make some major improvements defensively, especially because they're going to be going against Iowa, a team that hung 49 points on Michigan State last week. That's going to be another interesting game to watch. That game is going to be happening on Friday night. Minnesota turned it around with a win against Illinois. Their offense got going and their defense was able to stifle Illinois, although Illinois does not have that great offense. But regardless, Minnesota did turn it around this week. We'll have to see if they can continue momentum going against Iowa. They do move up 2 spots, though, to number 9. And again, speaking of Iowa, they are going to take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, as I just talked about. They're going to be on the road, but they do move up 5 spots from last week. I did have them at 13th last week, but they absolutely demolished Michigan State, and they deserve to be higher than 13th. Some might argue they deserve to be higher than 8th. I've seen a lot of power rankings where they've been as high as 6, and I think the reason for that is because their defense statistically looks really good, not even allowing 20 points per game and allowing only 315 yards per game, which both respectively rank 3rd in the Big Ten. They still find themselves 1 and 2. This Iowa team, again, I did expect them to take a step back. However, looking at this team now, it looks like they could be right around where they have been in years past. Iowa could get to 500 this year. This game against Minnesota is going to be interesting to watch. I think it definitely also will separate teams in the West even more. This week is going to be interesting to watch for these two teams. Their offense is flowing under Spencer Petras. I wonder if Amir Smith-Marset is going to be back for this game. It sounds like that he is. So we'll have to watch him in that game. But for right now, Iowa's going to be at number 8. They still sit at 1-2 with a dominant win. All right. Now, a lot of you, I think, are going to disagree with me on this, which is absolutely fine. Go ahead and disagree with it all you want. It does not change my opinion. Michigan is a team that just does not look that great after a loss against Indiana, 21-38. And Michigan seems to be heading in the wrong direction, but the stats look good. They have a tough game against Wisconsin, and their loss to Michigan State doesn't look great, but they had a dominant win against Minnesota, and, of course, this loss to Indiana. It looks bad, especially for Jim Harbaugh, but it doesn't look terrible considering Indiana is one of the better teams. Michigan did have an off week this week. It just, again, second straight week that Michigan could not play their game. It was the second straight week that they got called for a lot of pass interference penalties. Remember, Don Brown's defense is one of the more handsy defenses in all of college football. But just talking about the Big Ten, they're probably the most hands-on defense in the Big Ten, which makes them really hard to play against if they don't commit penalties like we've seen them commit the past 2 weeks. And I think that's what's really killed Michigan, because this offense is pretty good under Joe Milton, and he has a lot of weapons such as Ronnie Bell, and of course that running game can be pretty good. Wasn't good last week against Indiana, but this offense can be good. It's the defense that I think has to flip that switch and turn it around. They are averaging opponents almost 30 points per game and over 400 yards per game, both of which need to change if Michigan wants to get back up to challenge a team like Ohio State or Wisconsin, which they play this week. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Michigan can turn it around if they do against Wisconsin. But for now, I don't fault them for losing to Indiana, and I think they're better than the teams that I had prior to Michigan on this list, and that's why they are at number 7. Moving up 4 spots from 10th are the Maryland Terrapins. How about this team going on the road to Happy Valley to upset Penn State 35-19? And that score is deceptive. Maryland gave pity points to Penn State late down the line. Suddenly that game against Ohio State looks a lot more interesting, although the opening lines clearly favor Ohio State, and Ohio State is the clear favorite to win this game. But Maryland's offense is very potent. Now, the stats in terms of points per game don't really show it. They rank 9th in the Big Ten, but 28 points per game is nothing to hang your head about. But yards per game, they rank 5th in the Big Ten with almost 430 yards per game. It's that defense, again, that just needs to turn it around. The 2-1 record is good for Maryland. Again, after losing to a team like Northwestern, they beat Minnesota, and then they beat Penn State. It's just that defense that needs to flip a switch, because that offense with Tulia Tagovailoa back there under center as the signal caller is absolutely fantastic. The defense, though, again, lots of improvements need to make. They do jump up 4 spots after an unexpected win at Penn State. Maryland's not going to move any higher, and I don't know how much they're going to drop after losing to Ohio State, saying that they lose to Ohio State. But again, if they can end up beating Ohio State, Maryland can find themselves top 3 in this poll, but for right now they sit at number 6. Purdue did not play this week. The game against Wisconsin got canceled. Now it sounds like Wisconsin is going to get back on the field this week, which is great news for them. But they have a really interesting game this week against Northwestern. Again, they still did not have Rondell Moore on the field for the game against Illinois, nor for the game against Iowa. But this Purdue team looks pretty good. Their defense is stifling in the points per game, again, in the yards per game, just allowing teams to get yards, threatening Purdue. But their offense has been able to keep up. Now, of course, only playing 2 games, the numbers can be a little off. They haven't had Rondell Moore either, but it sounds like they are probably going to have him against Northwestern, which is absolutely huge. That's going to be an absolutely phenomenal game to watch. Probably Big Ten game of the week. I'm still deciding between this game and the Michigan-Wisconsin game. Spoiler alert, one of those games will be Big Ten game of the week. Maybe Ohio State-Maryland. I'm just not sure which game to pick yet. That will be decided when you see the video on Thursday. But this Purdue team, looking really well. And again, they do not move after not playing. They stay at number 5. Staying at number 4 after a win against Nebraska, 21-13. It's the Northwestern Wildcats who find themselves 3-0 for the first time, I believe, since 2000 in Big Ten play. And they look like one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, maybe behind Ohio State's and Wisconsin's. But they look like one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. Statistically speaking, only 12 points per game, including not allowing a single point in the fourth quarter this year, or even the second half. I believe it's the second half. Not a single point in the second half this year, while opponent yards per game are absolutely amazing, 314 yards per game. That ranks second among Big Ten teams, I believe. The first is the team you're going to see here in a little bit. The offense under Peyton Ramsey really does flow. The game against Nebraska wasn't an offensive explosion by any means, but that Nebraska-Northwestern games, they're usually pretty close. This looks like one of the better teams in the Big Ten. They can prove it with a win against Purdue this week. I've been really excited to watch this team play in a pretty big game, and this is going to be a big game. It could decide who goes to the Big Ten championship game if Wisconsin doesn't play enough games. But Northwestern, a good win over Nebraska. They do not move anywhere. They stay at number 4. Now, because Wisconsin did not play last week, they do drop a spot. They drop to number 3. Now, after only playing one game, those are their respective ranks. When you look, it's pretty good, but keep in mind they have only played one game, and it was against Illinois, the worst team in the Big Ten by pretty much everyone's standards. Again, a no contest against Purdue because that game was canceled. It does look like they're going to get back on the field this week against Michigan, which is phenomenal. And having basically 3 weeks to prepare, how does Wisconsin come into that game? It's going to be really interesting to watch how that all unfolds. The offense looked great. The defense looked great. It was a great showing for Wisconsin against Illinois. We'll have to see if they can continue that into next week against Michigan. Again, this is a team that hasn't played in a long time, so we'll have to see how they come out of quote-unquote football retirement. They are getting back on the field this week, which is good. I hope to see them play next week, but they do drop a spot because they did not play. They're going to be at number 3. Moving up to number 2 are the Indiana Hoosiers. They move up a spot from where they were last week. They find themselves 3-0 after a huge win against the Michigan Wolverines, beating them for the first time since, I believe, 1988. And they can end another streak in a couple of weeks with Ohio State. But, of course, next week they go on the road to play Michigan State. This is the team that takes advantage of the short field. You see that they only rank 12th in the Big Ten among yards per game, but that's because when they get turnovers, they force teams to commit turnovers when they're backed up. So they forced Rutgers to commit turnovers where Indiana got the ball at around the 10-yard line. They forced Michigan to commit turnovers. They even forced, they have forced everyone to commit turnovers. They commit turnovers, they get short fields, and that's why that yards per game is pretty deceptive. However, Indiana's offense is really, really potent. I love this Indiana team under their head coach. It is absolutely phenomenal what he has been able to do in Tom Allen. That is the coach's name. Sorry about that. Their defense looks pretty strong as well. This game against Michigan State shouldn't be terribly difficult for a team like Indiana. But again, the real test comes in 2 weeks. Indiana does move up a spot to number 2, but I don't think there's any doubt who is number 1. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes, again, in a league of their own. They look like overall the best team in the Big Ten, the best points per game, best yards per game. And while the defense statistically doesn't show it, they are one of the better defenses in the country when they are playing their game. Remember, they held Rutgers to only I believe 9 points in 3 quarters until Rutgers just kind of took it away in the fourth quarter offensively. Ohio State just kind of backed off defensively. Again, unequivocally the best team in the Big Ten. They have a pretty interesting game this week against Maryland. I would not look over that game if you are an Ohio State fan like myself. Maryland defensively is not that great, so it is going to be a pretty high-scoring game because Maryland's offense is just pretty darn good. It's going to be an interesting one to watch, but I don't have to talk about this team anymore. Again, beating Rutgers did not come as a shock to anyone, and they are unequivocally the best team in the Big Ten. They stay at number 1. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 3 power rankings. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. Also consider subscribing if you are brand new to the channel, or you just enjoy my content, turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload and you can join Tailgate Nation. Also leave a comment down below. Tell me your personal power rankings if you would like. Also, please share this video with everyone that you know and love. I'm trying to grow the channel as big as possible. So please share this video with everyone who likes Big Ten football as much as you and me. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys on Thursday with my week preview. Goodbye.